And thanks everyone for joining us today. AIVRS is going to present on AIVRS case management. And I want to thank Angela Santa Ana. She's here with us today from Anchorage, Alaska. She is an Alaska native, and she also is a faculty instructor with Northwest Indian College TVR Institute. And Angela has a lot of experience in the AIVRS community, working with AIVRS projects, and we're just very excited to have Angie here with us today.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me, Jamai, everybody. My name is Angie Santa Ana. I'm Chippewa, Alaska Native, and I've worked in vocational rehabilitation for about 7 years, and I live here with my family, and I'm so honored to be with you this morning.
So some quick instructions. Go ahead and use the chat box to introduce yourself. You can put your name, where you're from, tribe, and tribal greeting. We'd all love to get to know you. So that chat box will just be in the bottom of the screen with the bubbles. If you're joining by phone, feel free to use *6 to talk and *9 to raise your hand. And there's some general guidelines for participating through Zoom. Feel free to use the chat box to enter any questions or comments in the chat. And Jamie will be watching the chat. And if any questions come up, I'm sure she'll read them and everyone will get their questions and comments answered. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Ava and Angela. I just want to start out with this quote about case management. And it basically says that, you know what, Ava, hold on just a second. I'm going to email you this version because it looks like the version on the screen may not be the one that I have.
Okay.
Because I added a couple of things to it. So if you'll stop sharing, I'll share my screen real quick. Sorry, guys. But I added a couple little extra things I wanted to make sure that we have on here. You don't want to see that. Hold on just a second. It's still not showing it. Maybe I'll email you the slide deck. I'm not sure what's going on here.
All right.
And while Ava's bringing that slide deck up, I just want to say that case management, the definition that I was looking at online says that case management is defined as a collaborative process that assesses, plans, implements, coordinates, monitors, and evaluates the options and services required to meet a participant's health and human services needs. And that at its core, case management is about transforming lives through individualized care and services so participants can meet their goals. And I was like, wow, that is huge. For one individual to have that much responsibility, you're, assessing, you're planning, you're implementing, you're coordinating, monitoring, evaluating, and all of this is to transform one individual's life. And I mean, to me, that was just huge to think that that's our responsibility. And so, but then I went on and I was thinking, well, what does a CFR say that case management is? And it basically says that American Indian VR services are required for an individual to maintain, regain, or advance in employment consistent with what? I know everybody knows this. Their strengths, their resources, their priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, interests, and informed choice. So to me, you know, the CFR says that that's what we're responsible for. But when we are actually providing case management, it is so much more than that. It's so much bigger than that. And it's huge. And I can remember my instructor, my advisor in school telling me one time about case management. She said, you don't let the tail wag the dog. I don't know if anyone's ever heard that before. And basically she was saying, don't let your case files, don't let your case load manage you, you manage it. And sometimes that's very hard to do. So we'll move on to the next slide. There are actually 4 components to case management. Number 1 is intake. Number 2 is needs assessment. Number 3 is service planning. And number 4 is monitoring and evaluation. And we're going to break this presentation down into these 4 areas. So number 1, intakes. That is the initial meeting that takes place between a counselor and your consumer. The counselor uses this time, you know, you gather information about the participant, identify any immediate needs, establish and start building a relationship, which is most important. And sometimes I'm real technical and I say, oh, you know, I need to get this information. I need to get this, 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 and this. And I really have to slow myself down and remind myself, you know what, this meeting, this first initial meeting with this consumer is about building relationships. So, you know, that first interaction is helpful for you to determine if the participant would benefit from VR services. Sometimes folks come along and they don't really, they're not there for the right reasons, you know, and during that intake, you can assess that. Also, you're going to continue to assess their individual needs in that intake meeting. If their needs kind of fall outside of your program, that's the opportunity for you to refer them to someone outside of your actual program. And maybe get some other resources in the community. Also, when we talk about intake, we're talking about the counselor actually conducting an initial intake interview with the applicant. You know, we're going to be looking at identifying their eligibility, looking at their needs for VR services. We're also going to be talking about anything that you observed during this intake meeting that is relevant to their particular VR services needs. So you're collecting information regarding their medical or psychological history. You're collecting information about their educational background, any of their vocational interests. A lot of information, you know, just through having a conversation with the consumer, you're trying to figure out, you know, what's going on, what the disability is, what the impairment is, what the obstacles to employment are, and how to remove those obstacles. So getting a good background on the consumer, you know, their social and cultural background is very important. And it's one of the main things that you need to be assessing as well, also about their disability. You know, sometimes there's some legal issues pending. I can't tell you, when I first started out as a counselor, I would get through all of this and I would start gathering medical records and then all of a sudden it would pop up later down the road. Oh, they have pending court case, or there's pending charges, or you know what I'm saying? And so that would most times keep them from being able to participate because you didn't know what the outcome of those court proceedings may be. And then also during this time, you're looking at their financial resources. Do they have transportation? Don't have transportation? and if they do or don't have health insurance. So there's a lot of things that you're collecting during this intake process. So we're going to talk about the goals of this intake meeting. You're trying to help them better understand about your project, what you're providing, what type of services you provide. We're also going to talk about any holistic healing services that we may possibly provide for them, taking into account their cultural input, and also any rights, responsibilities. We want to talk about confidentiality during this intake process. Of course, we're going to talk about client assistance program and CAP services. This is very important in the beginning that you provide that information as well. And then we could also talk about state VR, if there's a relationship with your office and the state VR office, and how you may work jointly with them in a dual situation to provide additional services. And really, I feel like in the beginning, we have to talk about the applicant's participation in their case. They're the ones sitting behind the steering wheel driving the bus. And so that's very important. And when we're doing this intake meeting, there's very different ways to approach it. We talked earlier about this is a case management webinar about how to manage your caseload. But also, this is I come at everything from a VR process kind of point of view. And so it may look like we're reiterating the VR process while we're talking about case management, but this is just how the case flows. This is the natural order of things, and this is how you want to approach your case management. So you want to talk about things in that intake meeting as far as what's going to be included in the application process. You want to talk about things as far as any assessment moving forward, if they do not have any medical records or any medical or psychological history, have any of that information, you'll probably be explaining to them the process for moving forward with assessments. And so what usually happens during the intake interview, you're going to provide them the information about your project, your contact information, how they're going to meet with you. You're going to be gathering that application data and information. During the initial intake is a good time to go ahead and start the application process. You may not finish it that day, but you will start it. And then filling out and signing any additional forms, any releases of information. You'll probably go ahead and start about talking about setting vocational goals and establishing trust through this rapport that you're establishing with them. Sorry, my computer's catching up. So documentation is very important during this initial intake. You want to make sure that the documentation that you need to use to determine eligibility is signed by the applicant. You want to make sure to include, for example, all of your releases for any of the agencies you may be requesting documentation from, Indian Health Services, any behavioral health records or agencies in your community that may be helpful or the participant has received services from, and any specialized physicians that they have received a diagnosis from. You definitely want to get releases of information for all of these different, you need different releases for different agencies. You can't just have one release, and I'm sure everyone knows that. Also, I feel that a functional limitations assessment is very helpful, especially if there's a physical disability, because you may have to refer them out for this assessment, but it gives you a full picture of actually what the impairment is and what the roadblock to employment is. Any additional health assessments, the comprehensive assessment starts at the referral. So you're going to be actually gathering data and gathering information in a comprehensive setting so that you are getting all the information that you need when you sit down and have your eligibility determination. Also, there's a lot of times that an individual that you're working with may have a family member, they may have a legal representative, and you want to make sure that you get consent at the very beginning, at the initial intake, to share any confidential information, because I'm sure everyone in this room knows that you're going to get a phone call from someone that says, I'm calling for so-and-so, or I am so-and-so's mother, or I am so-and-so's guardian. And so you want to make sure you have that written consent if they're over the age of 18. And any other specific forms, that pertain to your project's policies. Do I see some questions in the chat?
Yes, there's a question about if we'll be able to get the PowerPoint presentation as a copy.
Yep, we sure will. We'll send it to you with the follow-up email. Let's go on to the next slide. So I've got an example of an initial intake meeting case note. And if you look over here at the photograph we have on this slide, it says, case note, we talked about coronavirus for like an hour. That's not an adequate case note. Let me pull one up real quick and we'll find out what your thoughts are on this. If you'll stop sharing, David, I'm going to pull up a case note real quick if I can. Let me see if this will let me share it. Can you guys see this case note?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, this is just one that I did myself, and it says, the reason for the referral, they needed assistance getting the job. What was their reported disability or the impediment to employment? The individual said they were diagnosed with an intellectual disability in grade school, also with ADHD and anxiety disorder. They're currently taking medications at the time of the intake. The participant was very honest and said, hey, I'm a little hyper. I have trouble with being hyper. And sometimes when I'm in a crowd, it's hard for me to comprehend, things that are going on. Could not get a driver's license because there were too many cars. It made this person anxious when they tried to drive. Have trouble remembering things correctly. But they really do like computers and they like to chat and text and talk on social media. So these were all things that were kind of talked about during the initial intake meeting. And then when I asked the individual about their work or their education, they said that, some of their vocational information was that they worked as a clerk at the Goodwill store, worked with a state VR, job coach one time, completed a trial work experience one time, but, didn't enjoy that type of work based on the disability information that we gathered. But they really like to read and really like to play video games, and wanted to work in a job with video games or talking to people about video games, how to play them, you know, that type of thing. Said that this individual also would like to work at a library or maybe at a school or as a student aid worker or something like that. But felt like talking too much was a problem. So maybe that wouldn't be a good job in the library. Then we talked about the individual's education, information, graduated from high school, the friend, and he said he had friends in school. So that tells me that the individual's social, you know, has friends. So this is just a lot of data gathering that took place just in conversation. And I was able to break it down in my case note, and into different areas such as social or economic, where the consumer was born, you know, what the situation was with the home life, did or didn't live with the biological parents, had some siblings, that some of the siblings also had disabilities. You know, these are things that just came out in conversation. He had trouble with managing money, but had a lot of interest and abilities and preferences, really wanted to work, said he was motivated to work with VR. So, you know, just having a conversation to me is a good way of gathering all of this information and just getting a good idea about your consumer and what it is exactly that they need. You know, the consumer did say what they felt like their goals and expectations were. And this is just a really good template. If you don't already use a template for your initial intake case note, you can break this information down into different areas, any observations that you made about the individual. This gentleman was a 23-year-old single Native American male. He was a self-referral, arrived for his appointment early. His great-grandmother was with him. He lives with his great-grandmother. She was a good transportation resource for him. You know, and so just a lot. I know this looks like a lot of writing, but it's in big font, so it's not really that much writing. And this helped me so that when I went back later, I actually could see the whole story that kind of developed in that initial intake meeting. You know, what this consumer's goals and objectives were, any mutual expectations or anything, any decisions that were made during that initial meeting. And then I put me some action steps in my case note so that I could look at, you know, what's next? Okay, this individual, I need to determine eligibility for services. I need to request some more documentation. I went ahead and had the application signed, so it was an application status. And we determined a realistic vocational goal at that time. And then I looked at possible assessments for consumer needs and what I could work with this individual and hopefully help them reach their employment goal. Now, I want to ask you, what do you think about that case note? Can we start sharing the PowerPoint again, Ava?
Yes, and there were a few questions in chat if you wanted to look at those.
Okay, great.
Jamie, it seems more like an initial interview documentation to me. Is that what it was intended for?
Yeah, initial intake meeting, yes.
Because our case notes are like maybe a paragraph. It says, you know, met with consumer, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, that looked more like an initial intake when the consumer first comes in and you document all of those areas in the case file.
Yeah,
Just a comment.
That initial intake meeting is probably where you're going to gather a lot of your information moving forward. And I'm just curious, what were everyone's thoughts about that? And thank you, Paula. Let's see, we have some comments here. Mark Allen. Who is Mark Allen? Mark, can you turn your camera on? Hey, it's good to see a face. Mark said, how much detailed confidential information do you write in the case notes? Well, I write as much information personally as I can. The case file is confidential, so everything that you put in it is confidential. However much they're comfortable sharing with you, it depends on you as the counselor, how you feel about asking questions. I'm a very inquisitive person, and I feel like the more I know, the more I can help someone.
Mhm.
But, some individuals don't want to divulge that much information. You want to comment on that, Mark?
No, I'm just concerned about HIPAA and confidential information and what kinds of information that you would keep in the paper file about the individual.
Yeah, that was actually an electronic case file note.
Mhm.
But I would have kept the same, me personally, I would have kept that information in the case file, which is
Okay.
confidential.
Okay. Thank
And we've got some more comments down here. Very detailed, very good documenting. I love that the setup for the case note. Chastity says definitely gives more of a full story.
Mhm.
Mark says concerns were HIPAA privacy rules. What do you feel like that we have overstepped HIPAA boundaries when we're asking those questions?
No, I just want to make sure that the information is not floating around and someone opening up the file or looking at the file that, you know what I mean? That's my
Yeah.
only concern.
Yeah, absolutely.
For,
You
for
would
us,
not.
for the case manager, it's good to know and to have, but someone else who's not familiar looking at the folders and stuff like that. That's all I'm concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely. Because confidentiality is of the utmost importance. And
Mhm.
I would never, as a counselor, allow anyone to access my case files that
Mhm.
was not within the program.
Right.
Anybody else have any comments? You think it should
Thank you.
have some less detailed information, what, maybe more? Or what important information do you think is included or not included?
I have a question. So we had a case where, the participant shared a tremendous amount, as far as being assaulted, and, the counselor had spoke to me about it, but she said she didn't document it. So she felt that that was too much of a personal information. So I'm wondering, should, moving forward in our cases, if that should happen again, should we even, case note those things? But in her opinion and her, the way she felt, that it was too personal, and
Well, I think we all have consumers that they really want to share, because they need someone to talk to. And we do provide counseling guidance, but up to a point. When it becomes clinical, I think that a referral to a mental health agency may be appropriate. What do you think, Angie? Have you ever gotten that situation?
Yeah. I'm glad they would be able to share, because this is, getting to know more about them, but perhaps reminding folks at the beginning that our time spent with them is looking at work, vocational, and part of their managing a disability would be being referred out to a mental health provider, so that when they are meeting with us or vocational rehabilitation, they can focus on employment goals. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Angie. That's right. I just want to go back to the chat box. Christopher said, well, Earl said, yeah, that's exactly what their intake notes look like. They prefer a detailed case note like the one that we showed on the screen. Christopher said, in regards to confidentiality, in our program, paper files are kept in locked cabinets, file cabinets, and our offices are locked when absent, and that he tends to write a shorter case note, which also includes the pertinent information, kind of like the example that we showed. And Pat said, in school with students on IEPs, and in order to access a file, there's an access sheet posted on the cabinet indicating who has access and must sign with the date, time, and purpose for checking the file. Is this something to consider for consumer files? I think, and everyone manages their project differently. So whatever you feel like is correct in your situation and whatever your policy determines. But yeah, I would say most definitely keep those files locked in a locked file cabinet in a locked office. That to me is the minimum that you could do as far as keeping case files confidential. And Karen said that she would like to document the assault that was just talked about. You know, I thought the same thing, Karen. I thought, wow, if a crime takes place, aren't we required to report? It looks like here, if it resulted in a disability, Karen said PTSD, depression, anxiety, all of these things impact employment, and the assault does not need to be recorded in detail.
I was just thinking on this part that we're not required to, report the assault unless it's a minor. But I'm often working with people who are directly impacted in their employment by violence that took place. And so I think we have to mention it in context with employment, but we don't have to mention the details. And like Angelina said, refer them on to mental health assistance and support services.
Yeah, absolutely. Good comment. Thank you for that. Pat asked, should there be an ROI for other staff on file to access the file? I've never heard of that. Pat, I'm assuming you're saying other project staff that work in your office with you. Is that correct? I think everyone in your office is considered on the grant and working for your project. So I have never heard of you having to require other staff in your office to sign an ROI. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So let's talk about how you're going to set up your case file, either electronic or a hard copy. There's 6 sections of your case file. That's important kind of design, and you design your case files any way you want to. But these are just some recommendations from us on how to set up your case file. You would have an IPE section, which would have your most recent versions of the IPE and any amendments. You would have your application section. You would keep your eligibility determination information here, any case notes pertaining to the case there. You'd have a training and job seeking section. So you would have any employment information, a job plan, case notes referring to any training services or any job seeking services that you've implemented, or if there's been any additional employment or training taken place prior. You may want, certificates if someone's certified or received an education or training. Also a diagnosis and treatment section. So this is where you're going to keep your medical documents, any assessments. If you have a treatment plan of any type, keep that under your medical or diagnosis and treatment section. Also an administration section is important. You need to have expenses, any vendor information, any requisitions. For example, if you do an equipment loan agreement, you would keep that under your admin section. Or also you could keep that under the financial section if you wanted to. So it's important to break your case file into different sections so you know where stuff's filed. Because we've all had that case file that's what, like 6 inches deep, and you have to wade through and try to find stuff. And so the best thing to do is, if you can, is break that case file into sections. Next slide, please. So let's look at what the policy says about your case files. In regards to case records, policy, and composition, the policy says that AIVRS projects must maintain a physical hard copy of a record of services for each applicant and eligible individual that includes documentation supporting the eligibility determination, the IPE, closure, and a description of how the applicant or eligible individual exercised informed choice throughout the rehabilitation process. All documentation pertaining to the provision of services must be included in each applicant and/or participant's case file, and all records of an applicant and/or participant must be maintained for 7 years. And I have the CFR. Angie, we talked about that yesterday, didn't we?
Yes.
I'll have to put it in the version that we email out. So this is what the policy says we need.
So just for reference, Jamie, you sent me was 361.47 record of services for folks who are interested.
I'll add that to this slide when we email it out to everybody. Next slide, please. We want to briefly talk about staffing cases in case you want to review your case with someone else. You know, the purpose of staffing cases is to look at, you know, your best practice or your guidelines, whatever your project's policy is on staffing cases. You need to have a uniform policy that says, you know, this is why we do this and what for. And the reasons for organizing or structuring a case staffing is to plan and inform any decisions regarding the participants receiving service from AIVRS, to support timely and appropriate service provisions to participants, to support counselors with additional knowledge and training as needed by their supervisors and/or their peers, to provide a learning environment for counselors, and to establish consistent case management practices for counselors across your agency. Next slide. And we do have a case staffing tool on our website. So if you go to aivretech.org, you can go to the tools section, and there is a case staffing tool section there. And the process is, you know, when you're reviewing your case files, and look at the case file review tool on our website, it can tell you how to use the tool. We give you a sample case file review form and the instructions on how to use it. So you can just go right to the website, download it, print it, and make copies of it to use for a tool at your office if you would like to. And we suggest that for supervisors and staff to use this to help each other in reviewing their case files for accuracy and additional layers of support. And if you identify as a counselor a case that needs staffing, you should bring that concern to your supervisor. And y'all can identify any cases that need a review or a consultation. So we're going to wrap up this section on intake, and we're going to talk about some tips. So here's a tip. Keep your case files organized. Keep a list of all of your documentation that you need to collect during the intake meeting. So you take form that you fill out. This allows you to see what you're missing or what may need updating. It saves you time, and it also saves your consumer time as well. And it allows for all of the program staff to locate the information if necessary. So in reviewing the intake section, let's, gosh, we're running out of time and I need to talk quicker. I'm not going to open a referral form, but if you do not have a referral form and you need a copy or need to see an example of a referral form, you can go to our website, avrtac.org, go to the referral section, look in the toolbox there, and there's a blank referral form. But you want to think about things like the consumer's preferred language, collect any necessary documentation, releases, medical information, mental health information, educational provider information. Make sure you collect any necessary eligibility documentation as far as tribal membership, their address on or near the res, a map maybe of where they live, get some general contact information, their name, address, phone number, emergency contact, if they have a transportation provider, and also the disability information, you know, a description of the disability, any limitations that are a result of the disability, their abilities, and also their vocational goal, any past work history, any of their skills, education history, any assessment information that may already be on file and you have documentation for, or any that may need to be referred out. And then case note all of this information. Next slide. We're going to talk about, oh, hold on, there's some stuff in the chat. Let me go over there and look at it real quick. People are talking about that assault. Okay, I see Bettina said a result of gender or certain places, other project staff. Neil says anything that's not paid for by a TVR agency is not shareable. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying, Neil? Are you on, Neil?
Yeah, I am on. Can you hear me?
I can. How you doing today?
Oh, good, good. No, it's just like if there's another place that's requesting information that you have received from another place that you didn't pay for, but you got it through a release of information, and another place is requesting that information, they can't get that information because they got to make their own release of information too.
That's right.
Source.
Absolutely correct. You're absolutely right, Neil. You can't be requesting documents and then sharing them with other folks. That is a breach of confidentiality, and that's a way to get in trouble. Thanks for bringing that up. So let's talk about needs assessment. This is the second section of case management where we talk about how the needs assessment builds upon the information that you previously collected during the intake meeting and going into greater depth as far as the participants' individual challenges or their goals. And during this assessment, your primary objective is to identify what any problems are, what their interests are, any risks to success. You want to try to get a good idea during that initial intake of what we're trying to address. And while every participant goes through this assessment when they first come into a VR program, it's important to reassess over time because things change, people's circumstances change, sometimes disabilities change. And so we need to often to reassess. Next slide, please. So what's a comprehensive assessment? Completing the comprehensive assessment involves reviewing information about the participant to develop a written plan that outlines the services, goals, and objectives that are later included in the IPE. So that's a brief, quick definition of comprehensive assessment. So this begins when you meet the individual when they request VR services, and it continues until the IPE is developed and signed. The process includes a review of the person's personality, their interests, their interpersonal skills, intelligence and related functional capacities, educational achievement, work experience, vocational aptitude, personal and social adjustments, employment opportunities, the individual's medical, psychiatric, and psychological history, and any other pertinent vocational education, any cultural implementations or any indications, social, recreational, environmental factors that affect this individual's employment and rehabilitation needs. So just kind of recap what comprehensive assessment is. We're gathering information to develop a written rehabilitation plan. We're looking at personality, interest, interpersonal skills, meaning, their social skills, education, work experience, training, history, or any transferable skills. And we're also looking at medical history, disability information, and impediments to employment. Next slide. So what if there's no medical diagnosis of a disability for determination of eligibility? So we have to have a disability diagnosis to determine eligibility. What are we going to do? We don't have any documentation. So you're going to have to schedule any necessary assessments or evaluations. Make sure you have that release signed and confirm the participants willing to participate in the evaluation process. Some folks don't want to be sent somewhere and assessed, and if they don't, unfortunately, you can't move forward if you do not have a medical diagnosis of the disability. So you're going to use this information that you have and any new information to develop the IPE. And I put a little thing down here at the bottom. This is my favorite saying: document, document, document. Case noting is one of the most important aspects of case management. You have to document every step of the process. Next slide. So here's a tip for prioritizing your tasks by your case. When you have a long list of tasks for each case and many such cases to manage, it's important to prioritize those tasks according to their importance and urgency, so that you give attention to the right case at the right time. Sometimes it's hard to prioritize sometimes, but you have to do this so that you can keep continuously moving your cases forward. Most tasks are linked and need coordination. For instance, if a case that needs to follow up for additional assessments, maybe the office admin might schedule these appointments for the individual or for you, and then notify the participant of the date and time of their assessment or their appointment. If you have a process in place and this is how it works, how the flow of things take place in your office, this keeps your cases moving. And by taking into account how tasks are linked, you can make sure tasks are completed in due time by the responsible person. And prioritizing tasks helps you to stay on top of key dates and to never miss a deadline. So that's a good tip about tasks. Make sure you move the task to the person that's responsible for it. If they're responsible for making an appointment for your consumer and then sending the consumer a letter saying this is the date and time of your appointment, make sure you're there, and then follow up with maybe a reminder. These are good ways to make sure that tasks are taking place and that you've got reminders in your calendar, to update you on where you are with each task. Next slide. And at this time, we want to talk about participant motivation. The Institute provides more information on this, but they say, that it's normal for your participants' motivation levels to change over time. They might be really excited in the beginning and really want to, apply for services. They're gung-ho, and then all of a sudden you don't hear from them for 2 months. So sometimes participants are motivated and self-directed. They take the lead in making informed choices, looking for services or employers. It's important to learn enough about the participant during the intake or during, additional meetings afterwards to find out what motivates them. And some participants may or may not want to be employed. They may also be motivated by other things, such as making good money, earning a good salary, or getting particular services for themselves or family members to help them. Participants may have a higher priority for seasonal activities that they're involved in, such as fishing, hunting, or subsistence, or seasonal cultural activities such as winter dances or powwows. They may not want to work when their children are out of school, or if they don't have relatives to take care of them, or if they do have relatives to take care of them. There's other major events in their families that may cause motivation to increase or decrease. So it's important to listen to what the participants say, to listen, but to also observe their actions, which, may clearly show to you what their motivations are. Next slide. And I don't think we have time to look at this eligibility case note. It was similar, but, Simon Cowell says, who wants to spend 90% of their day writing case notes? That's a solid no for me. No one wants to spend all their time writing case notes, but you got to make sure that when you get to every step of the VR process, for good case management, you're going to make sure you have a good case note for that step. So when you get to the eligibility determination, write a very clear and concise eligibility determined case note, because that's how you're going to justify the services in your IPE, right? I'm looking at the comments section. Karen's talking about utilizing a tribal healer for the needs assessment or elder familiar with a consumer who could document the disability. Wow, that's interesting, Karen. Talk to us more about that. Does anyone else use this resource?
Well, my understanding from our perspective, can't even talk today, from not just a policy perspective, but from the regulations, that a tribal healer or an elder can do the documentation piece. Or family members can write a note saying, yes, this is what I've observed, or, like not every kid in transition has a 504 or an IPE, but they're still dealing with anxiety and depression, that may not be documented by the school. So there's different things that we can use holistically to provide that documentation of the disability.
Thank you for that comment, Karen. I appreciate that. Has anyone else done this? Has anyone else used a tribal elder or a holistic healer to help with the eligibility determination or the diagnosis? I see some heads shaking no. Paula, do you have any comments on that?
I'm sorry, having trouble unmuting. Ask the question again, Jamie.
Karen had given us a really great comment. She said that sometimes that they utilize a tribal healer or a holistic healer or elder in the community to help with the diagnosis of the disability.
Absolutely. We have diagnostic, well, for our, with our program, we do, oftentimes that is the, that's done, a diagnostic is done by a medicine person. And, there's different ways they do that, looking into charcoal, hand tremblers, crystal gazers, and they do do a diagnosis first, and then we include that in the eligibility part of it. And then, of course, eligibility relates to the IPE. So we'll provide whatever they recommend. We'll put it in the IPE for services, native healing services. So absolutely, that's an important part of the process.
Real quick, Paula, because you're my neighbor.
Hey, Lise.
How do you document that, or how do they document that? Do you guys have a certain form?
You mean payment, or we just documented on the eligibility form?
Whatever the healer
We
discloses
documented
to.
on the eligibility form. You know how you get medical records from a physician, or records from a behavioral health program. It's utilized the same way. I mean, they don't write a note, but we do it as far as the case notes.
So are you guys like there with them at the time, or do you kind of just go off of what they say? Because I know you, just like you all, we use Medicine Men too, but then I know that you guys have those healers through IHS, or the through like Tuba City Regional Health. And
Yeah, it doesn't cost. That's a comparable benefit too. If they go into their Indian Health Service facility, their clinic, their hospital, and IHS employs traditional healers there, and they can go in and get a diagnosis. And usually yeah. So we usually we're not there with them, because it's between them and the medicine person, but they'll bring back the information to us, and we just if it's at IHS, we can get those medical records. But if it's with someone outside of IHS, we just use the information from, because we can use client information, family report, client report, family report as part of eligibility. So as far as records, so I don't know if I'm being very clear, Elise, but if
it gives
done at
me
an
the
IHS
idea,
facility-
because we do have a lot of, well, not a lot, but I know here and there we get participants who don't have that, and they don't like to go to the healthcare. They don't like the behavior health care. So trying to find other routes, and then having to do an agreement with the evaluator, and which costs thousands and thousands of dollars, and then we have to make sure we cram all of them in to get an assessment or an evaluation done just to get their diagnosis from 2 hours away. I mean, that just makes a little bit more sense and might help us a little bit more in getting eligibility determined in a more faster way. I guess you could, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we use the traditional healers if that's the route the consumer wants to go, and it does help in the process, and it's more of a holistic approach to working with them.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for that input, Paula. That was very helpful. I'm curious though, like, like our community is very close knit, and people are very private, and I'm just curious how that would work out, like in a small community. I know the consumer has to feel comfortable with it and trust the individual and all of that, but that would be a wonderful resource.
I think that is a challenge with us, Hopi here. A lot of, we don't have very many services, so everybody's going to one behavior health or, at one presentation, I had the comment of the traditional healer at practice at their hospital there, that we mentioned they have a healer there. And he got upset, and he goes, well, I know somebody who went there, and not even 10 minutes out of their session, somebody was already talking about them. They seen them there, and they were getting. So it's just for us in our rural area, we know you know them. It's challenging. And like I explained, some don't like to go to the behavior health. And to me, I mean, they're swamped. It's hard to get in. I tried splitting them between Tuba City as well, but just with the whole pandemic and so many issues that are arising now, I think it's tough but it's just a waiting line, and we have to try to explain that to our participants too, but we want them to get better. We want them to be able to get help.
And that's why it's so important building those relationships, and it's difficult because IHS, the doctors turn over, and you don't want to go talk and tell your story over and over and over again to a different person every time you go. So that's also difficult. Let's go ahead and move forward because we're running out of time. I want to turn this over to Angela. Angie, we're going to pick up with service planning and move forward quickly.
All right. So service planning is particularly important to the success or failure of a participant. And so the counselor can help the consumer with specific goals and actions. So what does that look like? Their disability that they experience when it's documented on their eligibility or in their IPE, though the services should address the barriers to employment and how the individual may benefit from vocational rehabilitation as far as an employment outcome. So, so services reflect what the individual experiences with the disabilities that are documented. Service planning, so writing a plan for employment. And usually that is done within the 90 days of, is service provision and the primary focal point in the first 90 days following eligibility. So, like I said, whatever the individual experiences as far as like having a documented disability, the services from the IPE should reflect that how they're going to overcome those barriers. And so that is based on informed choice. The individual decides what vocational goal that they would like to pursue, who is going to help support the cost of the IPE, such as comparable benefits. Let's see here. And throughout the whole process, from the application to post-employment, the consumer should be informed of their rights and responsibilities, the grievance process, fair hearing, and the client assistance program, so that they have the purpose that they're here is that they have rights and responsibilities. They're reminded, this is a volunteer program. However, we are a work first program, and with that, there are guidelines. And here are the guidelines. Provision of services. So addressing the impediments or the barriers to employment, and how that is going to focus on an employment outcome. So services support the individual to achieve an employment outcome. There are, let's see, examine the participants' need for change. Throughout the process, the individual may be experiencing an adjustment to a disability, or, they're in a new stage in their life, and recommending assessments for diagnosis would be helpful, because there are changes. And again, with counseling and guidance, and helping the individual manage their disabilities by seeking counseling, medication management, sober support, whatever it may be, so that they are doing their part. Yeah, it is a partnership. We could look at job search, on the job supports, if they have not worked in a long time, and they are wanting to try out a job. TVR can support the individual with that. And of course, clothing or transportation. And then document. Service planning, tip number 3, assign and schedule tasks. Ensure nothing slips through the cracks. Tasks must be delegated to people with deadlines. So TVR is also a time-limited program, in that both of you agree in the IPE that the individual has the opportunity to seek employment and to utilize methods toward employment, either job, on-the-job training, or trial work experience, and with specific dates in mind. So once they understand, that this is a partnership, they have identified a goal for employment, and there are dates for achieving what would you call like milestones in their plan. Delegating and scheduling tasks to complete those, and documenting those as well. Let's see here. Tip number 4, follow up on tasks. So this could be like a collaboration of services also. So if you do have a shared case with maybe state vocational rehabilitation or another employment program within your tribe, you're going to complement services. So effective communication, what does that look like? In your initial meeting with the counselor, the consumer, and maybe another organization, you can always start off with a initial meeting and state, this is the plan, state who is going to pay for what services, and that each group and the consumer has this in mind, that this is a vocational goal that the individual is working toward. And of course, you have your release of information form signed prior, and going to be looking at the tasks for the consumer to work toward. Looking at IPE case note. So having a case note, you are you're in control of the file, providing structure for the case note for the consumer, identifying barriers, what are the start and end dates. You see it in a way that you're providing a case note that when another counselor takes over the file, there's a good understanding of what the direction of the case is, how the person is progressing. So does your case note tell a story? Monitoring and evaluation. So evaluation is critical for understanding the impact of specific programs. Counselors should continuously monitor and evaluate the participants' progress. So what does this look like? You know, are you meeting with the individual on a regular basis, having communication on a regular basis? Have you assigned the person homework to complete? And having the person, you know, are they excited to find work and things like that? Employment and case closure. So when participant obtains employment, the counselor begins the case closure process. And so that could be done by the individual has obtained employment and is going to be having a successful employment outcome. And the counselor documents the rehabilitation process as an individual having become rehabilitated. So when you think of vocational rehabilitation, what I've learned is that you are helping the individual see that they are able to manage the disability while working. And so that whole process is rehabilitation. So just keep that on the back of your mind. So services, appropriate services were provided in the IPE toward an employment outcome. The employment, the consumer and the counselor both agree that the job is satisfactory, and case note that. And then if the individual needs post-employment services, like just that one more supportive service, go ahead and add that in your post-employment service. Closure. What are your thoughts? Is the case note detailed? What important information is included or not? You have your process, you have your policies and procedures in place. Go ahead and utilize your best judgment on case closure, with the understanding, having the individual understand that they have met their part of the process. Has it become a successful employment outcome? If not, what do you do to address that with the individual? Post-employment services. Like I said, if there is just that one more supportive service that they may require or request, honor that for them. And the individual has been given the opportunity to maintain, regain, advance in employment consistent with their strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, interests, and informed choice. So that is the goal. And the post-employment services can be within 12 months of the case being closed successfully. And in accordance with AIVRS best practices, post-employment service may be provided if an individual meets each of the following 4 criteria. And you see here the bullets, 90 days of consecutive employment, justified need to obtain employment, utilizing their informed choice, a successful outcome, and the duration of the case, the VR case. Closing the case without a successful employment outcome. Here you can see some of the reasons why they may not be a successful closure. No longer eligible, declines to accept or participate in vocational rehabilitation, unable to meet, perhaps you have a loss of contact after 3 tries of contacting the individual, became incarcerated, moved out of your service area, and again, cannot be located, fails to cooperate, or become deceased. Let's see. Again, if a case needs to be closed, consult with the consumer, note the circumstances, allow the individual to have the opportunity to stabilize some area of their life, whether it's establishing childcare or perhaps maintaining sobriety, have that individual make that choice to stabilize some area in their life, and welcome them to reapply once that stabilization has taken place. If you have been unable to contact the individual, you can look in the application and contact their emergency contact and state, who you are and leave a message, and perhaps that individual can contact the consumer on your behalf. All right. And if you're able to meet with the participant or the consumer, explain the reason for case closure. If the individual feels that their case has been closed and they don't agree, they have been explained their rights and responsibilities, the grievance process that you have. They can contact the client assistance program and go from there. So monitoring and evaluation tip number 5, use templates for routine correspondence. This can be a time saver for you. Use templates to copy and paste for your case notes, for your intake application, so that you are using good time management. Case file record data management. So case file is a record, and data management tracks data of the participant and organizes in a way for program statistics. So this can be really helpful for program managers who are writing their annual reports or their 6-month reports to show what progress your program is making for folks who are in a plan for employment or folks who have been employed during your annual goals and objectives. So just keeping that in mind. Time management. Effective time management can really help prevent burnout and maximize productivity. And so whatever method that you use, using case notes, using your calendars, using your electronic tools, using deadlines, having, regular meetings perhaps with staff. You can do like having your 24-month calendar and calendar specific goals that your grant says that you should try to accomplish. And just seeing, okay, so this month we need to meet so many criteria, like people being eligible, folks being in a plan for employment, targeting your goals so that your program is moving forward. So if you use an electronic case file, use a software that is going to, what you state in your grant is that what you are going to use. So that's what it is for using software and wrapping this up. So Jamie?
Yes, thank you, Angie. I certainly appreciate you covering those points of case management for everyone. If you want to talk more to me, if you do not have software system and you're trying to figure out a way to track your caseload, you can send me an email. We can talk. I can call you and talk about maybe an Excel spreadsheet that would help you track your caseload. Winona and I had worked on developing a spreadsheet. And so sometimes that'll help you with your due dates and things like that. And I like what's this guy's name from Toy Story? The astronaut. He says, welcome to the team. You see those 70 untouched files covered in dust? That's your caseload. And that's how we feel sometimes. We just get a pile of cases and we're trying to figure it out. So time management, as Angie said, is of the utmost importance because moving that case along is so very important. Using tips and techniques, to use the best of your time. Case noting, I can't tell you how important case noting is. And, using things like templates for your letters, templates for your case notes and things like that. It does save you a lot of time. I want to thank everyone for being here today. You've been a great audience. We appreciate you all for coming and helping us out. I want to put the survey over there in the chat if I can find it. I believe it's in the webinar folder. If you guys could fill out the survey for us, that would help us tremendously. It just kind of gives us some good feedback on what we need to change, how we need to change, if we need to change, if we need to add more, take away. I know it was a lot of information in today's presentation, so I appreciate you guys that hung in there the whole time.